we're starting with something absurd, a flight that takes 53 seconds. Westray to Papa Westray, 2 islands in Orkney. The flight between them takes 90 seconds on a slow day. The record? 53 seconds. Pilot Stuart Linklater flew this route 12,000 times before retiring. The distance is shorter than Edinburgh Airport's runway. After landing, passengers get a certificate and a whiskey. Base Rock, a volcanic plug in the Firth of Forth. Every summer, 150,000 gannets descend on this single rock. That's 10% of the world's entire population on one rock. The rock turns white not from chalk, but from birds. Sir David Attenborough called it one of the 12 wildlife wonders of the world. From the mainland, it looks like an iceberg that never melts. Ebenezer Place in Wick. The world's shortest street, 2 meters 6 centimeters. That is shorter than LeBron James is tall. Built in 1883, it has one address, a bistro door. The council told the owner to name it as a separate street, and he did. Guinness certified it in 2006. The Kelpies are 2 horsehead sculptures near Falkirk. They are 30 meters tall and weigh 300 tons each. They were modelled on Clydesdale horses named Duke and Baron. They are named after Scottish water spirits, shape-shifting creatures that lured travellers to their deaths. Now they are a tourist attraction. Over 1 million visitors came in the first year alone. Sanquhar Post Office, operating since 1712. That is 313 years without closing. It is the world's oldest. Second place is Stockholm, 8 years younger. This post office opened 5 years after Scotland joined England. Robert Burns posted letters here. You can still get a special hand stamp to prove you visited. The Falkirk Wheel, the world's only rotating boat lift. It connects 2 canals separated by 24 meters of height. Each gondola holds 500,000 liters of water. And here is the mad part. Lifting 600 tons of boat and water uses just 1.5 kilowatt hours of electricity. That's 8 kettles. 8 kettles to lift a ship. Scotland has a tree older than Stonehenge. We'll meet it later. The Mayclower beech hedge is 30 meters tall and 530 meters long. It is the tallest hedge in the world. It was planted in autumn 1745. The men who planted it marched to Culloden that same year. They never came home. Some say the trees kept growing toward heaven, searching for the men who planted them. That story deserves more than 30 seconds. We'll come back to it. Scotland has more world records per square mile than any country its size. It is a tiny nation of 5 million people. Yet, somehow, it has the shortest street, the shortest flight, the tallest hedge, the oldest post office, the only rotating boat lift, and the largest horse sculptures. And we are only at the 43rd fact. The 53-second flight costs £17. You board a Britain-Norman Islander, 8 seats, propellers, no jet engines. The plane barely reaches cruising altitude before descending. Locals use it for medical appointments. Students use it to get to school. It has been running since 1967, nearly 60 years of the world's shortest commute. Papa Westray, the destination of that flight, has a population of 85, 60 archaeological sites, and 1 airstrip made of grass. The flight exists because ferries do not run every day. Geography created a problem. Scottish stubbornness created a solution, and that's just the world records. Wait until you see what's hidden underground. We'll get to the underground, but first, some things are strange even in plain sight. In 1838, Edinburgh Castle received a gift, an elephant. The army regiment stationed there had brought it back from Sri Lanka. The elephant lived in the castle grounds. Soldiers fed it. Visitors adored it. Somewhere along the way, it developed a taste for beer. The elephant became, by all accounts, an alcoholic. It lived in a castle. It drank ale. This is a true story. Edinburgh created the world's first municipal fire brigade in 1824. A man named James Braidwood watched the city burn one too many times and decided to do something about it. He trained the first professional firefighters. His methods spread to London and then to the rest of the world. Every fire brigade on earth traces back to one frustrated Scotsman. Glasgow's necropolis. A cemetery built in 1833. What made it radical was that anyone could be buried there. Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, atheist, it didn't matter. The first non-denominational graveyard in Britain. built on a hill overlooking the cathedral. 50,000 bodies. Some of the most elaborate Victorian tombs ever constructed. Death, but democratic. Electric Brae is a short stretch of road in South Ayrshire. Put your car in neutral and it rolls uphill, or at least it seems to. It is an optical illusion. The land around the road tricks your brain into misreading the slope. During World War II, General Eisenhower was stationed at nearby Colesden Castle. Eisenhower brought visiting generals and dignitaries to watch cars seemingly defy gravity. The future American president entertained guests with a Scottish optical illusion. Bonnybridge, a small town between Glasgow and Edinburgh. There are 300 UFO sightings per year, one of the highest concentrations on Earth. Locals call it the Falkirk Triangle. The town council once wrote to the Prime Minister demanding an investigation. They never got one. The sightings continue. Fairy Glen on the Isle of Skye, a landscape so strange it looks almost artificial. Miniature hills, spiral patterns in the grass, and formations that seem designed rather than natural. No one built it. Geology did. But standing there, you would swear something else was responsible. The fairy pools are on Skye, a series of crystal clear pools at the foot of the Black Quillins. The water is so transparent you can see every stone on the bottom. People swim here year-round. The water temperature rarely rises above 10 degrees. Scots don't seem to mind. This is the Garden of Cosmic Speculation, covering 30 acres in Dumfriesshire. It was designed by architect Charles Jenks. Every element is based on mathematics and physics. Spiral mounds represent DNA, and bridges are shaped like fractals. The garden is built to make you think about the universe. It is open to the public 1 day per year. Elephant Rock, a sea stack on the coast at Bodden Point. Wind and waves carved it into the shape of an elephant drinking from the sea. No human involvement, just time and erosion sculpting something that looks intentional. Scotland builds strange things, but nature outdid us all. And some of what nature built here is older than you'd ever believe. Dinosaurs walked on Scottish soil. We're going there next. But first, the creatures that live here now. Scotland holds 60% of Europe's breeding gannets. Not 10%, not 20%. That share represents most of an entire continent's breeding population concentrated in one small country, most of them on Bass Rock, the volcanic plug we mentioned earlier. When those gannets dive for their fish, they hit the water at 100 kilometers per hour. Faster than city traffic, they fold their wings above your back and become missiles. Their skulls have evolved air pockets to absorb the impact. A design so efficient, engineers study it. The Isle of May is a small island in the Firth of Forth. During breeding season, 200,000 seabirds arrive. Puffins, guillemots, razorbills, and shags all compete for nesting space. The noise is deafening. The smell is worse. But for bird watchers, it's paradise. BC Countryfile named it Nature Reserve of the Year. 110,000 puffins live in the Firth of Forth alone. They return to the same burrows every year. They mate for life. They can carry up to 12 fish in their beaks at once, held crosswise like a cartoon. Evolution built them ridiculous, and Scotland gave them a home. Sir Niels Olav is a king penguin at Edinburgh Zoo. He holds the rank of brigadier in the Norwegian King's Guard. This is official, not honorary. He has been knighted by Norway. A penguin living in Scotland outranks most soldiers. The regiment visits him during the Edinburgh Tattoo. They march, he waddles, and everyone salutes. The gannets on Bass Rock produce 152,000 kilograms of ammonia per year. It comes from their droppings. That's why the rock turns white. That's also why you can smell it from the mainland. A wildlife wonder of the world with a warning for your nose. From birds that dive like missiles to machines that lift like magic, Scottish engineering deserves its own chapter. Back to the Falkirk wheel, we mentioned uses only 1.5 kilowatt hours per rotation. Here is why. Archimedes' principle explains it. The weight of water displaced by a boat equals the weight of the boat itself. So both gondolas always weigh the same whether there is a ship inside or not. The system is perfectly balanced. Physics that is 2,000 years old is solving a modern problem. Building the Falkirk wheel required 15,000 bolts. Every single one was hand-tightened. Not machines, workers. The wheel was designed to last 120 years. It opened in 2002. We are only 23 years in. The wheel replaced 11 locks that once connected the two canals. Traveling through those locks took an entire day. Now it takes 4 minutes. One piece of engineering saved thousands of hours every year. Shore porters. Society Aberdeen, founded in 1498, is the oldest transport company in the world. It is still operating. They have been moving people's belongings for over 500 years. They predate the Reformation. They predate the printing press in Scotland. They were already operating when Columbus was still trying to convince people he'd found India. Even Scots do not know most of these. And we are only halfway through, but everything we have seen so far is recent, relatively speaking. The next 10 facts go back further, much further, to a time when Scotland sat south of the equator. When dinosaurs left footprints on beaches that would not exist for another 166 million years. And when humans finally arrived, they built cities on top of cities, burying entire streets beneath their feet. Ancient Scotland, hidden Scotland. That's where we are going now. 166 million years ago, Scotland did not exist, not as we know it. The land that would become the Isle of Skye sat south of the equator. The climate was subtropical. Palm trees, warm lagoons, and dinosaurs. The Isle of Skye holds 15% of all mid-Jurassic dinosaur discoveries, not just in Britain, but on Earth. One island off the west coast of Scotland contains more evidence from that era than almost anywhere else. Dr. Stephen Bressat from the University of Edinburgh calls it a subtropical kind of paradise world, probably kind of like Florida or Spain. At Duntone Beach, scientists found something they call the dinosaur disco. Dozens of footprints overlap and tangle together, chaotic, as if multiple dinosaurs had gathered in one place and milled about. Sauropods, theropods. There are prints the size of dustbin lids, pressed into mud that later turned to stone. They are still visible today if you know where to look. In 2004, researchers found the world's smallest dinosaur footprint on Skye. Proof that baby dinosaurs lived here. Families, not just passing through, they were breeding, raising young, and dying. An entire ecosystem frozen in rock for 166 million years. The Quirain is a landslip on the Trotternish Ridge, and it is the largest in Britain. The land is still moving, slowly sliding toward the sea. It creates an alien landscape of pinnacles and plateaus. Vikings used to hide cattle here. Filmmakers use it for science fiction. The geology does not care. It just keeps sliding. Kilt rock, cliffs on Skye's eastern coast, 105 meters tall. The basalt columns look exactly like the pleats of a kilt, vertical stripes of grey and black. A waterfall drops directly into the sea beside them, nature designing tartans. Scotland's ancient past isn't always visible. Sometimes it's buried. Mary King's Close, a street in Edinburgh, except it's not on any map you'd recognise. It's underground, beneath the Royal Mile. In the 17th century, Edinburgh's buildings rose 14, 15 stories high, some of the tallest in the world. When the city needed to expand, they didn't demolish, they built on top. They chopped off the upper floors and used the lower ones as foundations. Entire streets frozen in time, buried beneath new construction. Mary King's Close was sealed for 250 years. Plague victims lived and died there. Ghosts allegedly remain. When it reopened in 2003, visitors found rooms exactly as they'd been left in the 1600s. A city beneath a city. The Edinburgh Vaults. 120 rooms carved into the arches beneath South Bridge, built in 1788, used as taverns, workshops, and homes for the poor, then abandoned, then forgotten, rediscovered in the 1980s. Some say they are the most haunted place in Scotland. Paranormal investigators queue up to spend the night. Gilmerton Cove, a series of tunnels and chambers carved into sandstone beneath a suburb of Edinburgh. Nobody knows who built them, and nobody knows why. Theories range from a blacksmith's secret pub to a Covenanter hiding place to something much older. The mystery remains unsolved. Beneath Edinburgh, there is a Cold War nuclear bunker, Barnton Quarry. It was built to house government officials if the bombs fell. Decommissioned long ago, it is now open for tours. Scotland once prepared for the apocalypse and then moved on. These are the ones nobody talks about, the ones even Scots haven't heard. And number one isn't a record, it's a story. A story about men, a hedge, and a battle that changed everything. We're almost there. Scotland's borders have shifted over centuries, but some lines are older than any nation. Shetland was Norwegian until 1472, so was Orkney. Not Scottish, not British, Norwegian. For centuries, the islands were pawned to Scotland as part of a wedding dowry and never redeemed. 550 years later, some Shetlanders still feel more Viking than Scot. The flag, the festivals, the accent, Norway never quite left. Scottish watershed. An invisible line running 745 miles from the southern border to the northern tip. Every raindrop that falls west of the line flows to the Atlantic. Every drop east flows to the North Sea. Two oceans separated by a ridge you can't see but can walk. Hikers have done it. It takes 2 to 3 months. Most of it runs through wilderness. No tourist ever visits. Skara Brae is a volcanic plug on the Isle of Eigg. It is made of pitchstone lava, type of rock found almost nowhere else on Earth. The columns look like the Giant's Causeway, but this is not basalt. It is rare. It formed in a single volcanic event 60 million years ago, an event that never repeated. Geologists travel from around the world just to touch it. Coir Legan. A hidden loch in the heart of the Black Highlands on Skye. It is surrounded by jagged peaks and fed by waterfalls. The water is so clear and cold it hurts. Climbers rest here between routes. Most tourists never see it. You have to hike for hours to reach it, but those who do say it is the most beautiful place in Scotland, worth every step. Scotland's oldest company is not Shore Porters. It is the Incorporation of Goldsmiths of Edinburgh. It was founded in 1525. It is still operating, still hallmarking gold and silver. 500 years of quality control. Still going. Charles Mackintosh didn't just invent the raincoat, he changed how humans live. Before 1824, rain meant staying inside or getting wet. After him, rain meant grabbing your coat and carrying on. One Glasgow chemist, one idea. Millions of lives lived differently because of it. A country famous for rain invented the solution to rain, and logical really, but that's Scotland, solving problems the world didn't know it had. The Fortingall Yew. Perthshire, a tree. Estimated age 3,000 to 5,000 years. Some say 9,000. It was already ancient when the Romans arrived. It was already ancient when Christ was born. The late Duke of Buccleuch put it simply, I never cease to marvel at the fact that there is something living today that was 3,000 or more years old at the time of the first Christmas. The tree has seen everything. Viking raids, the Wars of Independence, Culloden, 2 world wars. In recent years, something strange happened. The tree, a male, began producing berries, a partial sex change, after 5,000 years still capable of surprise. There is a legend that Pontius Pilate was born near the Fortingall Yew and that he played under its branches as a boy. It's almost certainly not true, but the fact that people believe it tells you something about the tree. It feels that old. It feels like it has seen everything, even the things that never happened. The Myclear Beech hedge. We mentioned it earlier. 30 meters tall, the tallest hedge in the world, planted in autumn 1745. But here is what we did not say. The men who planted it were Robert Murray Nairn and his workers. That same autumn, they marched south to fight for the Jacobite cause. The Battle of Culloden came in April 1746. Robert was killed. Most of his men never returned. Jean Mercer, Robert's wife, left for Edinburgh. The hedge grew untended. Nobody cut it. Nobody trimmed it. For decades, it just kept reaching upward. Some say the trees are still searching, still growing toward heaven, looking for the men who planted them and never came home. The hedge was last trimmed in 2019. It took 4 men 6 weeks. Before that, 20 years without a cut. 280 years later, the tallest hedge in the world is also a war memorial, a living monument to men who planted something beautiful and never saw it grow.
Scotland is not just castles and bagpipes, it is a war zone. A land built on the collision of ancient continents, carved by ice, torn by faults, and shaped by volcanoes that exploded when dinosaurs were still 250 million years away. The rocks here are among the oldest on Earth, the seas are among the deadliest. And the landscapes? They are so extreme that British commandos trained here to fight Nazis in the Arctic. This is Scotland, where every mountain has a violent past, every loch hides a secret, and the ground itself is still moving. Fact 50. Britain's highest peak is flat. Ben Nevis rises 1,345 metres above sea level, making it the tallest mountain in the United Kingdom. But here is the twist. Its summit is not a sharp peak. It is a flat plateau covering 100 hectares, larger than 70 football fields. The top is a frozen, windswept wasteland where snow lingers year-round. Temperatures sit 10 degrees Celsius colder than the base. It feels less like a mountain and more like landing on another planet. Fact 49. A lake that outweighs 2 countries, Loch Ness, contains more fresh water than every lake, river and reservoir in England and Wales combined. We're talking 7.5 cubic kilometres of water, roughly 263 billion cubic feet. To put that in perspective, you could submerge the entire population of Earth 10 times over in Loch Ness. One Scottish lake holds more water than 2 entire countries, deeper than the sea around it. Loch Ness reaches a maximum depth of 230 metres. That is deeper than the average depth of the North Sea, which sits at just 94 metres. You imagine. You could drop the Eiffel Tower halfway into Loch Ness and it would disappear beneath the surface. A lake deeper than the ocean around it, geographic inversion at its finest. Fact 47. Scotland's deepest secret. Loch Morar is Scotland's deepest lake at 310 metres. That's 80 metres deeper than Ben Nevis is tall. Picture this. You could fit the entire Shard building of London inside it. Drop something into Loch Morar and it would vanish. It is deeper than many sections of the North Sea. It is a lake that plunges deeper than the surrounding mountains rise. Fact 46. An archipelago of ghosts. Scotland has between 790 and 900 offshore islands, depending on what you count as an island. But here is the catch. Only 96 are permanently inhabited. That means 90% of Scotland's islands are empty. Ghost islands. Forgotten rocks scattered across the Atlantic, home to seabirds and silence. Fact 45. The island with an identity crisis. One island, 2 identities. Lewis and Harris is technically one island, the largest in Scotland, at 2,179 square kilometres. But ask the locals. They will insist it is 2. The 21,574 residents are fiercely divided. Say you're on Lewis when you're in Harris and you've made an enemy. Geography says 1, culture says 2. Closer to Norway than Edinburgh. The Shetland Islands sit 170 kilometres north of mainland Scotland, but 190 kilometres west of Norway. They are geographically closer to Scandinavia than to their own capital. Shetland is Britain's Arctic outpost, a windswept Viking world. Fact 43. Rocks older than oxygen. In the northwest Highlands and on the Outer Hebrides you will find Lewisian gneiss, rock that is 2.7 to 3 billion years old. That is 2/3 the age of Earth itself. These stones existed before life crawled onto land, before the atmosphere had breathable oxygen, before continents as we know them even formed. You are walking on the surface of deep time. Fact 42. Bigger than a country, emptier than a neighbourhood. Cairngorms National Park covers 4,528 square kilometres, making it larger than the entire nation of Luxembourg. Yet only 18,000 people live within its borders. That is fewer residents than some London neighbourhoods, a wilderness the size of a country with the population of a village. Fact 41. The fastest river in Britain. The River Skye stretches 172 kilometres, making it Scotland's second longest river. But it's not about length, it's about speed. The Skye from Irn Bru flows faster than any other major river in Britain. During floods, it moves more water per second than the Thames despite being half the length. A river that chose intensity over size. Loch Ness never freezes, not even during Highland winters that drop to minus 20 degrees Celsius. The reason is a thermocline effect. Cold water sinks, warm water from below rises, creating an endless circulation loop. While everything around it turns to ice, Loch Ness keeps churning. Physics as a heating system. Visibility in Loch Ness is about 10 centimetres, roughly 4 inches. The water is stained. Dark brown from peat runoff, thick as tea. You could have a submarine floating 1 metre in front of you and never see it. The most famous lake for monster sightings has the perfect built-in camouflage. Total darkness, the third deadliest whirlpool on Earth. Between the islands of Jura and Skara lies the Coastlines whirlpool, the third largest in the world. At full tide, currents reach 8.5 knots, around 16 kilometers per hour, generating waves up to 9 meters tall. The roar of churning water can be heard from 16 kilometers away. It's not just dangerous. It's loud. Underwater pyramid. What causes Coastlines chaos? A pyramid-shaped basalt pinnacle rises 29 meters below the surface from a hole 219 meters deep. Britain's tallest sea stack is cracking. The Old Man of Hoy stands 137 meters tall, a freestanding tower of red sandstone and basalt rising from the sea. It's one of the United Kingdom's most iconic sea stacks, visible for miles. But there's a problem. A 40-meter vertical crack has been growing through its south side since 1992. Geologists agree it will collapse. They just don't know when. The sea stack that lost a leg. The Old Man of Hoy wasn't always a single pillar. Originally, it was a double arch with 2 legs. A violent storm in the early 19th century washed one leg away, leaving the lonely tower we see today. A sketch from 1819 by William Daniel shows both legs, the old man literally. It lost a limb, a crack that counts down. That 40-meter crack splitting the Old Man of Hoy isn't stable. The base is under constant wave attack. Erosion eats away at its foundation every single day. It is a geological time bomb. The countdown is running, but the clock has no numbers. Could be days, could be centuries. Nobody knows. A concert hall carved by lava. Fingal's Cave. Cave on the island of Staffa is 75 meters deep and 20 meters high, entirely formed from hexagonal basalt columns. But what makes it legendary is the acoustics. The cave's geometry creates near-perfect sound reflection. In Gaelic, it is called an uam bin, the melodious cave. Composer Felix Mendelssohn visited in 1829 and was so inspired he wrote his Hebrides Overture based on the echoing waves. Fact 32. A bridge of fire between nations. Fingal's Cave and the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland were formed by the same lava flow 60 million years ago. They were once connected before the Atlantic Ocean tore them apart. The legend says the giant Finn McCool built a bridge between Scotland and Ireland. Science says the legend is half true. The bridge existed. Britain's Arctic plateau was made of lava. The Cairngorms hold the largest subarctic plateau in the British Isles, sitting over 1,000 meters high with a tundra climate. This is not alpine. This is Arctic. The landscape feels more like northern Canada or Norway than Scotland. Rolling, barren, treeless, and merciless. There is an observatory on top of Britain. On the summit of Ben Nevis, you will find the ruins. It began as a weather observatory that operated from 1883 to 1904. Victorian scientists lived here, year-round, taking hourly measurements in subarctic conditions. Over 21 years, they recorded 1.5 million observations. It was technically the highest building in Britain, a frozen stone house on the roof of the kingdom. A car climbed Scotland's highest mountain. In May 1911, Henry Alexander Jr. drove a Model T to the summit of Ben Nevis as a publicity stunt to prove American cars were superior to British ones. It took 5 days. Picture shoving a car up a mountain in 1911 when automobiles were barely more advanced than horse carriages. Absolutely. Effective? The story's still told today. Fact 28. The mountain that exploded. Ben Nevis isn't just a mountain. It's the eroded core of a supervolcano that erupted and collapsed about 350 million years ago. What you're climbing today is the frozen inner dome of a volcanic system comparable in power to Krakatoa. Scotland's highest point was born in fire. Fact 27. A scar you can see from space. The Great Glen Fault is a 100-kilometre-long tectonic fault line slices Scotland diagonally, from southwest to northeast. It is so straight and so deep you can see it from orbit. This is the geological knife that cuts Scotland in two. Fact 26. Scotland slid sideways. Over 400 million years, the land north of the Great Glen Fault shifted roughly 100 kilometres to the southwest. It is a jigsaw puzzle that rearranged itself. The Highlands. You see today weren't always where they are now. They travelled. The fault still growls. The Great Glen Fault isn't dead. Since 1816, there have been about a dozen recorded earthquakes along the line. The strongest hit Inverness in 1816 with a magnitude of 5.1. The most recent tremor was in 2021. The scar is still alive. It's just sleeping. Is Nessie just gas? Some scientists believe seismic activity along the Great Glen Fault releases gas bubbles from the bottom of Loch Ness. These bubbles rise and disturb the surface, creating mysterious ripples and wakes. The most famous monster in the world might be geological burps. Romantic? No. Plausible? Absolutely. George Orwell almost drowned here. In August 1947, author George Orwell nearly died in the Corryvreckan whirlpool after misreading tide tables. His boat capsized, and he and his 3-year-old son were stranded on a rock until rescue. He survived. Then he went to the island of Jura and finished writing 1984. The whirlpool spared him so he could write a darker future. The Witch's Washing Machine. The name Corryvreckan comes from the Gaelic Coir Breacain, meaning cauldron of the speckled seas or cauldron of the plaid. Legend says the Cailleach, the ancient winter goddess, washes her giant plaid here. When it is clean, she lays it over Scotland and winter begins. a whirlpool as divine laundry, mythology explaining hydrology. Glencoe is not just a valley, it is the collapsed remains of a 420-million-year-old supervolcano. It was the first place on Earth where geologists recognized and documented a caldera subsidence in ancient rocks. Scottish geologist Sir Edward Bailey pioneered the concept here in the early 1900s. Glencoe literally defined how we understand volcanic collapse. If you're enjoying these facts and your mind is already blown, do us a favor, hit that like button and subscribe. Because we're only halfway through and the next 20 facts get even wilder. Fact 20. A canal 65% natural. The Caledonian Canal stretches 100 kilometers from Scotland's east to west coast, connecting the Atlantic to the North Sea. But here's the genius part. Only 35 kilometers were actually dug by hand. The rest uses natural lochs, Dochfor, Ness, Oich and Lochie, all sitting perfectly in the Great Glen. Nature did 65% of the work for free. Fact 19. A staircase for ships. At Banavia, the Caledonian Canal features Neptune's staircase, the longest staircase lock in Britain. It is 8 locks in a row, lifting boats 20 meters over 90 minutes. Picture a ship climbing a mountain, one step at a time. Built between 1803 and 1820. Built by engineer Thomas Telford, it still works perfectly today. Fact 18. A canal that opened already obsolete. The Caledonian Canal cost £910,000, took 19 years to build instead of the planned 7 years, and when it finally opened in 1822, it was already outdated. Steam-powered ships with iron hulls had gotten too big. The canal opened the same day. It became irrelevant, a monument to miscalculation. Yet today it attracts over 500,000 visitors a year. From failure to tourist magnet, Scotland's specialty. Fact 17. Britain's freezer. The village of Braemar in the Cairngorms has recorded Britain's lowest temperature twice, -27.2 degrees Celsius on February 11, 1895, and again on January 10, 1982. Same record, 87 years apart. It's the coldest place in Britain, a permanent Arctic outpost in the Highlands. Fact 16. Winds that lift cars. In January 1993, the Cairngorm Summit Weather Station recorded the highest wind speed ever measured in the United Kingdom, 283 kilometers per hour. That's 176 miles per hour, strong enough to flip vehicles and rip roofs off buildings. At that speed, the mountain becomes a weapon. Fact 15. Snow that refuses to melt. The Cairngorms receive an average of 320 centimeters of snow annually. Some snowfields in System Herad and on Ben Macdui survive from one winter to the next, persisting through summer. They're the only semi-permanent snowfields in Britain. In a country famous for rain, not ice, these patches, they are glacial ghosts, a flat plateau that kills. In November 1971, 5 school children and 1 adult died of hypothermia on the Cairngorm Plateau. They got lost in a snowstorm on the 1,200 meters high plateau. The terrain is so flat and featureless that in whiteout conditions, navigation becomes impossible. Britain's deadliest mountain disaster did not happen on a peak. It happened on flat ground. Ground. Flatness itself was the killer. Fact 13. Arctic animals in Scotland. On the Cairngorm Plateau, you will find animals that should not exist at 57 degrees north latitude. Snow buntings, ptarmigans and reindeer. 80% of Britain's snow bunting population breeds here. These creatures are Arctic relics, survivors of an ice age that never quite ended. Fact 12. Treacherous tides. The Orkney Islands sit just 16 kilometres from the mainland of Scotland, close enough to sea, but the Pentland Firth between them is one of the most dangerous stretches of water in the world. Tidal currents rip through at terrifying speeds, creating whirlpools, standing waves, and underwater chaos. Geography as a moat. Vikings named it after architecture. The island of Staffa gets its name from the Old Norse word stafa, meaning staff or pillar. Viking explorers looked at the hexagonal basalt columns and thought of their own vertical building beams. They saw geology and thought of construction. Fact 10. Nature does math automatically. The basalt columns of Staffa formed through slow cooling of lava. As the surface solidified, the material contracted and cracked into hexagonal patterns, the most energy-efficient geometry for distributing stress. Fact 9. A cliff waiting to give birth. St. John's Head on the island of Hoy rises 352 metres, one of Britain's tallest vertical sea cliffs. At the top, a massive rock overhang called Bru is slowly detaching. When it finally falls, it will create a new sea stack over 270 metres tall, twice the height of the Old Man of Hoy. Fact 8. A World War II dare. During the Second World War, young Royal Air Force pilots used the 60-metre gap between the Old Man of Hoy and the mainland as an initiation test. Flying through the narrow gap in a fighter plane with unpredictable coastal winds was a rite of passage. Geography as a test of courage. 7. Walking on air above a crumbling tower. On July 10, 2017, highliner Alexander Schultz walked a 180-metre line from the top of the Old Man of Hoy, across open air, 137 metres above the crashing sea below. It was the highest highline walk in the United Kingdom, a rope over a geological wonder, with a 40-metre crack splitting it apart. Fact 6. Chaos creates life. The violent currents over the Corryvreckan underwater pinnacle make it a paradise for filter feeders. Corals, sponges, and mussels cling to the rock. This attracts harbour porpoises, dolphins, and even minke whales who feast on fish, disoriented by the swirling water. For whales, chaos is a buffet. Fact 5. Scottish rocks are Canadian immigrants. Lewisian gneiss originally came from the region of modern-day Canada and Greenland. Before the Atlantic Ocean opened 60 million years ago, Scotland and North America were joined. When the continent split, some Canadian rocks stayed behind. Scotland's oldest stones are American expats, monuments built from deep time. The Callanish standing stones on the Isle of Lewis were erected around 5,000 years ago during the Neolithic period. But the stones themselves, they are made of Lewisian gneisses, 3 billion years old. Humans took the oldest rock on Earth's surface and made it sacred, 5,000 years of human history sitting on 3 billion years of geological memory. Fact 3. Commandos trained here to stop the Nazis. During World War II, British and Norwegian resistance fighters trained in Glencoe's subarctic conditions to prepare for the Telemark raid in Norway. In 1943, they successfully sabotaged Nazi heavy water production, crippling Germany's atomic bomb program. Scottish geography helped prevent a nuclear nightmare. Fact 2. Scotland was once Himalaya high. Glencoe and the Highlands are part of the Caledonian mountain range, a 5,000-kilometre chain that once stretched from eastern North America, through Greenland, across Scotland, and into Norway. Formed 400 to 500 million years ago, these mountains were as tall as the Himalayas. What we see today are the eroded roots. Fact 1. The Highlands are fossils of a supercontinent collision. The mountains we see today are the stumps of a range born when ancient continents collided, closing an ocean called Iapetus. That collision created a supercontinent called Pangaea. Scotland sits on the scar tissue of Earth's greatest tectonic crash. Every Highland peak is a gravestone for an ocean that no longer exists. And there you have it. 50 geography facts about Scotland you probably never knew. From whirlpools that roar like gods to mountains born in fire, from lakes deeper than the sea to rocks older than oxygen itself, Scotland is a land where geology writes the rules and time is measured in billions. Which fact changed how you see Scotland? Drop a comment below and do not forget to subscribe for more geography stories that blow your mind. Fact 3. Commandos trained here to stop the Nazis. During World War II, British and Norwegian resistance fighters trained in Glencoe's subarctic conditions to prepare for the Telemark raid in Norway. In 1943, they successfully sabotaged Nazi heavy water production, crippling Germany's atomic bomb program. Scottish geography helped prevent a nuclear nightmare. Fact 2. Scotland was once Himalaya high. Glencoe and the Highlands are part of the Caledonian mountain range, a 5,000-kilometre chain that once stretched from eastern North America through Greenland, Scotland, and into Norway. Formed 400 to 500 million years ago, these mountains were as tall as the Himalayas. What we see today are the eroded roots. The peaks were scraped away eons ago by ice and time. The Highlands are fossils of that ancient range. This was a supercontinent collision. The mountains we see today are the stumps of a range born when ancient continents collided, closing an ocean called Iapetus. That collision created a supercontinent called Pangaea. Scotland sits on the scar tissue of Earth's greatest tectonic crash. Every Highland peak is a gravestone for an ocean that no longer exists.
Scotland covers just under a third of the UK's land, but its coastline stretches close to 60% of the entire British total. That is nearly 18,700 kilometres of rugged edge, more than the rest of the UK combined. The reason lies in the geography itself. The west coast fractures into countless inlets, peninsulas and sea locks, while islands multiply the shoreline's length at every scale. By contrast, England's coasts run straight for long distances, barely dented by estuaries or bays. Measured by the Ordnance Survey, Scotland's chaotic perimeter stands among Europe's most intricate, rivaling even Norway for complexity. This is where the mathematics of geography start to defy expectation. The Isle of Lewis and Harris covers 2,178 square kilometres, stretching across the Atlantic edge of the Outer Hebrides. Greater London, the UK's capital and home to nearly 9 million people, fits into just 1,572 square kilometres. That means this single Scottish island is almost 40% larger than the entire London region. Yet Lewis and Harris supports a population of only about 20,000. Moorland, ancient stone circles, and white beaches fill the space where London's endless streets would be. For anyone who thinks of the Hebrides as remote specks, the numbers tell a different story. Here, raw geography dwarfs the capital itself. Scotland's islands form a world of their own, nearly 790 scattered from Shetland to the Hebrides, with more than 90 permanently inhabited. Each island supports its own rhythms and traditions, shaped by separation from the mainland and from each other. Life moves to the timetable of ferries, some running only once or twice a week, especially during winter storms that can leave entire communities cut off for days. On the smallest islands, schools sometimes teach fewer than 10 children, and everyone knows one another by name. For many, island living means resilience, adapting to weather, distance, and the quiet that comes with being surrounded by water. Scotland's landscape is saturated with water in a way that's hard to grasp until you hear the numbers. Although it makes up just under a third of the United Kingdom's land, official environmental statistics report that Scottish rivers and lochs hold around 90% of the United Kingdom's surface fresh water. The scale is staggering. Over 31,000 freshwater lochs and lochans dot the country, compared to only a few hundred lakes in England. This abundance is not just a quirk of climate, it is the legacy of glaciers that gouged thousands of deep basins into the bedrock at the end of the last ice age. The result is a natural reservoir system so vast it stores more water than two countries combined, setting the stage for even more extreme depths to come. Loch Morar plunges to a depth of 310 metres, so deep that its floor sits 301 metres below sea level. For comparison, the North Sea averages just 95 metres deep. This means that fresh water in Morar lies hundreds of metres lower than the nearby ocean, sealed off by a rocky rim that keeps the Atlantic out. The loch's surface sits only 9 metres above sea level, but the water column stretches down into a trench carved by ancient glaciers. Murray and Puller's early 20th century bathymetric survey confirmed the numbers, and more than a century later, Morar still holds the title of the United Kingdom's deepest inland water. Scottish lochs like Morar, Ness and Lomond sit in basins so deep their floors lie well below sea level, yet their waters remain fresh water. This is the work of glaciers, massive ice sheets that once scoured the Highland valleys, carving trenches hundreds of metres down, sometimes far beneath the nearby ocean. At each loch mouth, a rim of hard rock or ancient moraine forms a natural dam, sealing the basin off from the sea. The result is a landscape where freshwater pools in over-deepened bathtubs isolated from salt water by geological barriers. These impossible basins set the stage for Scotland's most staggering water volumes. Loch Ness holds a staggering 7,452,000,000 cubic metres of fresh water, more than every lake in England and Wales combined. Stretching 36 kilometres along the Great Glen, it forms a deep, trench-like ribbon, plunging to 230 metres at its deepest point. The sheer volume comes not from surface area, but from depth. It is a vast glacial basin carved straight through the Highlands, and because of its size and the chill mass of water below, Loch Ness almost never freezes, even in the harshest winters. On the shores of the Outer Hebrides, ancient bedrock surfaces in broad sweeps of banded stone. This is Llywelyn gneiss, rock forged between 1.7 and 3 billion years ago, when the Earth's atmosphere held almost no oxygen, and life was still microscopic. Radiometric dating of zircon crystals confirms its age, placing it among the oldest exposed rocks in Europe. Geologists mapped these formations across Lewis, Harris, and parts of the northwest mainland, tracing a record that predates the Alps, the Himalayas, and even the first plants. Scotland's foundation is deep time itself, visible in every weathered outcrop. Much of Scotland's bedrock was already ancient, long before the world's most famous mountain ranges even existed. The rocks that form the Highlands, including Llywelyn gneiss, Moynish schists, and Dalradian quartzites, date back up to 3 billion years. These ancient stones predate the Alps, which began rising only 50 million years ago, and the Himalayas, younger still at about 40 to 50 million years. The Rocky Mountains, icons of North America, are mere newcomers at 80 million years. While Mont Blanc, Everest and Denali tower in height, the stone beneath Scottish feet is nearly 3 billion years older. These mountains may have lost their youthful peaks to time, but the foundation remains, carved from a crust that predates modern continents. Scotland's deep time legacy is not measured in summits, but in the sheer age of the earth beneath. A single line cuts across Scotland, unmistakable from space, a geological boundary stretching 220 kilometres from Helensburgh on the Clyde to Stonehaven on the North Sea. This is the Highland Boundary Fault, a scar left by ancient continental collisions during the Caledonian orogeny nearly 400 million years ago. To the north and west, the land rises sharply into the Highlands, built from hard metamorphic rocks shaped under intense pressure. South and east, the ground softens into rolling lowlands of younger sedimentary stone. The fault does more than divide scenery. It shapes rivers, roads, and even weather. Satellite images reveal its diagonal slash across the country, a visible reminder that Scotland's landscape is still ruled by the forces that built it. The very bedrock sets the stage for what comes next, volcanic peaks rising in the heart of its capital. Edinburgh sits on the bones of an ancient volcano, its cityscape shaped by eruptions that shook the land nearly 350 million years ago. Arthur's Seat, rising 251 metres above the city, is the worn-down heart of a carboniferous volcano, its slopes now a green refuge at the city's edge. Just to the west, Castle Rock stands as a volcanic plug, a solid core of cooled lava left behind when the softer rock around it eroded away. Edinburgh Castle perches atop this crag, while the Royal Mile runs along a tail of glacial debris, a classic crag and tail formation carved by ice moving east. This geology isn't just a backdrop, it dictates the city's layout and skyline, blending urban life with a landscape born of fire. Few capitals can claim to be built on a volcano, but in Edinburgh, every street echoes with ancient eruptions. Rainfall in the Western Highlands defies all expectations for a temperate country. Met Office gauges on the slopes of Ben Nevis and in Glen Etive regularly record over 4,000 millimetres of rain each year, with some peaks reaching as high as 4,577 millimetres. That is nearly twice the average rainfall of the Amazon rainforest, where 2,300 millimetres is the norm. The reason is the Atlantic, moisture-laden air slams into mountains, rising over 1,000 metres, is forced upward, cools, and releases torrents of rain. The result is a landscape where rivers run full year round, moss carpets every stone, and green dominates every view. This deluge is not a rare event. It is the climate year after year, shaping forests, glens, and even the way people build their homes. On Scotland's east coast, the climate flips the script. Dunbar, perched on the North Sea, averages just 550 millimetres of rain a year, less than Barcelona's 600 millimetres. This is not a one-off. Towns like Dundee and even Edinburgh often record less rainfall than Mediterranean cities. The reason lies in the Highlands. Mountains rising over 900 metres catch Atlantic storms, wringing them dry before the clouds reach the east. Within just 200 kilometres, rainfall can drop from metres to barely half a metre. The result is a patchwork of climates, lush, rain-soaked valleys in the west and dry farmland struggling with drought in the east. Nowhere else in Britain does weather change so sharply, so quickly, in such a short distance. A journey of just 200 kilometres in Scotland can take you from Arctic tundra to gardens that feel almost Mediterranean. On the Cairngorm Plateau, above 1,000 metres, ptarmigan nest among wind-blasted rocks, sharing space with dwarf willows and alpine saxifrages that usually grow far north of the Arctic Circle. Snow can linger here into June, even as the valleys below begin to warm. Yet drive west to the shores of Inverewe and you will find palm-like cordylines and subtropical rhododendrons thriving outdoors, their leaves catching the salty air. The Gulf Stream's warmth, combined with steep altitude drops and the ever-present sea, compresses these climate zones into a single, narrow country. Nowhere else in Britain does such a dramatic ecological shift happen so quickly. Scotland's geography squeezes an entire continent's worth of climates into a single sweep of land. Stand on any hillside in Scotland, and the ocean is never far. The farthest point from the sea sits near Glen Coich above Braemar, deep in the Cairngorms, but even here, the straight-line distance to salt water is only about 65 kilometres. Ordnance Survey calculations confirm there is no spot in Scotland more than 65 kilometres from the coast, a distance some countries would call a short commute. This proximity shapes every aspect of life and weather. Maritime air sweeps across the land year-round, softening winters and keeping summers cool. The Gulf Stream's warmth reaches even the inland glens, making harsh extremes rare. With the sea always within reach, Scotland's climate, culture and settlements remain tethered to the tides, reinforcing its identity as a nation defined by water. Across the Highlands, emptiness takes on a scale rarely seen in Western Europe. The Highland Council region covers 26,484 square kilometres, nearly a third of Scotland's land, but supports only about 235,000 people. That's just 8 people per square kilometre, a figure lower than much of Arctic Norway. The landscape that once held tight-knit communities now rolls on, mile after mile, with barely a house or a road in sight. This is not just the result of harsh terrain or northern latitude. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the highland clearances forced thousands from their homes, leaving behind wide glens where only deer and golden eagles roam. Today, the Highlands stand as one of Europe's last true wildernesses, a place where silence stretches further than the roads and the human footprint fades into the hills. Glasgow once powered the world's shipyards. At the height of the Clyde's industrial might, around 46% of Britain's ship tonnage was launched from its banks, outbuilding every other British port combined. Legendary vessels like the Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth were assembled at John Brown and Company in Clydebank. Geography gave Glasgow its edge, a deep, sheltered estuary that could handle the largest hulls and easy rail links to Lanarkshire's coal and iron. The river's wide, navigable channel meant shipyards could stretch for miles, each slipway feeding a global appetite for steamers, liners, and warships. For generations, families in Clydeside lived by the tides and the clang of steel, their skills turning raw geography into the engine of an empire. In the winter of 1850, a violent storm tore across Orkney, stripping away turf and sand from a low mound near the Bay of Skye. Beneath the battered earth, stone walls and passages appeared, revealing Skara Brae, a Neolithic village frozen in time. Radiocarbon dating places its origins around 3180 BCE, making it older than Stonehenge's Great Stone Circle and even the pyramids of Giza. Inside, stone beds, hearths and dressers remain exactly where their builders left them, preserved by the sand for nearly 5,000 years. Skara Brae stands as Europe's best preserved prehistoric settlement, a window into a sophisticated community that thrived before most of Britain's ancient monuments were even imagined. Where others see myth, Orkney's exposed stones are proof. Scottish culture's roots run deeper than almost anywhere else in Europe. Scotland now produces more renewable electricity than it uses, a feat unmatched anywhere else in the UK. By 2020, official figures recorded that 97.4% of Scotland's gross electricity consumption came from renewables. In some years since, total generation has reached as high as 113% of domestic demand. Most of this power comes from wind, with onshore turbines scattered across Highland hills and offshore giants like the Beatrice Wind Farm in the Moray Firth, which alone can power hundreds of thousands of homes. Hydroelectric stations, some dating back to the mid-20th century, still harness the force of Highland rivers and lochs. Geography is the engine. Constant Atlantic winds, steep glens, and vast catchments make Scotland's landscape a natural powerhouse. The surplus is not just kept at home, it flows south to the rest of Britain and even overseas, proving that geography is not just history, it is a modern advantage measured in megawatts. Irn Bru isn't just a soft drink in Scotland, it's a statement. While Coca-Cola sits at the top of sales charts in almost every country on Earth, here it is the bright orange bottle that leads the pack. Year after year, Irn Bru outsells Coke across Scotland's supermarkets, corner shops and football stadiums. This isn't a recent fluke or a one-off marketing coup. Since at least the 1980s, Irn Bru has held the #1 spot, even as global giants poured millions into advertising campaigns. The secret isn't just in the recipe, but in the sense of mischief and pride that comes with every can. AG Bar's legendary Made in Scotland from Gerda's campaign, launched in 1984, turned industrial grit into national identity with tongue-in-cheek ads that became instant classics. Across generations, Irn Bru has been the drink of choice for hangovers, celebrations, and everyday moments, a fizzy badge of belonging. In a world where uniform brands dominate, Scotland quietly keeps its own champion on top. Geography shapes the land, but sometimes it shapes the taste buds too. Only here does a homegrown drink outshine the world's biggest name. That's Scottish exceptionalism, measured not just in miles or meters, but in every bottle opened and every toast raised.
Gruinard Island, the anthrax experiment. In 1942, with Nazi Germany developing biological weapons, British scientists needed a testing ground. They chose Gruinard, a small island off Scotland's northwest coast. Over several months, they detonated bombs filled with anthrax spores and watched as 80 sheep died agonizing deaths within days of exposure. The scientists got their data and left. But the spores did not leave with them. Anthrax can survive in soil for decades, even centuries. Warning signs went up around the island's beaches. For 48 years, no one was allowed to set foot on Gruinard without protective equipment. It took 280 tons of formaldehyde sprayed across every acre of the island before the government declared it safe in 1990. The original owner's heirs bought it back for £500, the same price paid in 1942. Some locals still will not go near it. Number 2. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse Mystery. On December 15, 1903, 3 lighthouse keepers on the Flannan Isles made their last log entries: James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur. Then they vanished. When a relief boat arrived 11 days later, keeper Joseph Moore climbed the 160 steps to the lighthouse, alone. The door was unlocked. The clock had stopped. Dinner was set on the table, untouched. One chair lay overturned on the floor, and the only living thing was a canary sitting silently in its cage. Outside, on the western landing, iron railings had been bent and twisted. A supply box had been smashed despite being over 100 feet above sea level. A 1-ton rock had been displaced from its position. But of the 3 men, there was no trace. No bodies were ever recovered. To this day, no one knows what happened that December night. The official cause of death reads simply, probably drowning. Number 3. Piper Alpha, the world's deadliest oil disaster. On July 6, 1988, 177 kilometers off Aberdeen's coast, a shift change miscommunication triggered the worst offshore oil disaster in history. A safety valve had been removed for maintenance. The night shift did not know. When they started the backup pump, gas leaked, found an ignition source, and exploded. The first blast ripped through the platform at 10 p.m. 20 minutes later, a high-pressure gas pipeline ruptured, feeding the inferno with 3 tons of gas per second. Men jumped 90 feet into burning oil-covered water. Others were trapped in the accommodation block as toxic smoke filled every corridor. 167 men died that night. 109 from smoke inhalation, 13 drowned, 11 burned, 30 bodies were never recovered. The inquiry revealed what everyone feared. The men in the accommodation block could have been saved if someone had given the order to shut down the connected platforms. No one did. Everyone waited for permission from someone who was already dead. Number 4. The Glencoe Massacre. On February 13, 1692, soldiers who had enjoyed MacDonald hospitality for nearly 2 weeks rose before dawn and began killing their hosts. The background was political. King William demanded all clan chiefs sign an oath of allegiance by New Year's Day. Chief McCain of Glencoe tried to comply but arrived 6 days late due to bureaucratic delays. That was enough excuse. Secretary of State John Dalrymple saw his opportunity to make an example. Captain Robert Campbell and 120 soldiers arrived in Glencoe claiming they needed quartering. For 12 days they ate MacDonald food, drank MacDonald whiskey, and slept in MacDonald homes. Then came the orders. Put all under 70 to the sword. 38 MacDonalds were murdered in their beds that winter morning. Another 40 died fleeing into the mountains, including women, children, and the elderly, who froze in the February snow. The crime was not the killing. Scotland had seen clan warfare before. The crime was the violation of Highland hospitality, the most sacred code of the Highlands. Guests had become executioners. That betrayal still echoes through Glencoe today. Number 5. Mary King's Close, Edinburgh's underground city. Beneath Edinburgh's Royal Mile, entire streets from the 1600s still exist in darkness, sealed away when the city built over them. Mary King's Close was once a busy thoroughfare, home to merchants, craftsmen, and their families. Then came the plague of 1644. The wealthy fled Edinburgh. The poor stayed and died. Estimates suggest between 1/5 and 1/2 of Edinburgh's population perished. The persistent myth says the city sealed plague victims inside Mary King's Close and left them to die. That is not quite true. The sick were cared for as best they could be. But after the plague passed, the close fell into decline. When the city chambers were built in the 1750s, they simply constructed over the top, using the old buildings as foundations. The close became a basement, then a forgotten cellar, then a legend. Today, you can walk those streets again, guided by actors playing 17th century residents. Tourists leave dolls for Annie, a ghost girl a Japanese psychic claimed to see in 1992. The child she described had been looking for her lost doll. Now there are thousands of dolls. Whether Annie ever existed is another question entirely. Number 6. Burke and Hare, the Anatomy Murders. In 1828, Edinburgh fresh corpses were worth 10 to 12 pounds to anatomy schools desperate for dissection subjects. 2 Irish immigrants realized there was easier money than grave robbing. William Burke and William Hare ran a boarding house in Edinburgh's West Port, a cramped slum in the shadow of Edinburgh Castle. When a lodger named Donald died owing rent, they sold his body to Dr. Robert Knox at Surgeon Square. The payment was more than a month's earnings, so they made more bodies. Over 10 months, Burke and Hare killed 16 people. They had a method: get the victim drunk, then suffocate them while leaving no marks. It became known as burking. Their victims were society's invisible people: lodgers, prostitutes, a woman named Mary Patterson, just 18 years old, and James Wilson, known as Daft Jamie, a young man with learning difficulties who was well known throughout Edinburgh. When his body appeared on Knox's dissecting table, students recognized him immediately. The killing stopped when a lodger named Anne Gray found a body hidden under a straw mattress. Hare turned informer to save himself. Burke hanged before a crowd of 25,000 on January 28, 1829. His skeleton still stands in the Anatomical Museum of Edinburgh University. Number 7. The Loch Ness Hoax that became a legend. The most famous photograph of the Loch Ness Monster was a toy submarine with a plastic wood head, photographed by a man seeking revenge. In 1933, a new road along Loch Ness's northern shore brought tourists and claimed sightings. The Daily Mail hired big game hunter Marmaduke Wetherell to investigate. He found footprints on the shore, triumphantly declared them monster tracks, and announced the discovery to the world. Then, the Natural History Museum examined the prints. They had been made with a dried hippopotamus foot, the kind Victorians used as umbrella stands. Wetherell was publicly humiliated. His revenge came in 1934. Working with his son Ian and his stepson Christian Sperling, Wetherell built a tiny monster head, attached it to a toy submarine, and photographed it on the loch. They recruited a London surgeon named Robert Wilson to claim he had taken the photo, adding medical respectability. For 60 years, the surgeon's photograph fooled the world. Only in 1994, when 93-year-old Christian Sperling was dying, did he confess the whole thing. But by then, Nessie had become Scotland's most profitable myth, with over 1,100 sightings and counting. Number 8. The Battle of Culloden and the destruction that followed. On April 16, 1746, the last battle fought on British soil lasted just 40 minutes. It ended the Jacobite Rising, and it began something far worse. Charles Edward Stuart's exhausted army of 5,000 Highlanders faced 9,000 well-fed, well-rested government troops under the Duke of Cumberland. The Jacobites had marched through the night and had not eaten. Cumberland's men had been drilling new tactics specifically designed to counter the Highland charge. When the clans attacked, British soldiers were ordered not to fight the man directly in front, but to bayonet the exposed side of the man to their right. About 1,000 Jacobites died on Culloden Moor. Another 50 government soldiers fell. But the real killing came after. Cumberland ordered that wounded Jacobites be killed where they lay. For days afterward, soldiers scoured the moor, executing survivors and burning nearby homes. Over the following weeks, 1,000 more died as troops swept through the Highlands. Villages were razed, cattle were seized, the wearing of tartan was banned, the playing of bagpipes was banned, the carrying of weapons was banned. An entire culture was made illegal. Cumberland earned a nickname that stuck: the Butcher. Number 9. The Highland Clearances. Between 1800 and 1855, landlords forcibly removed 70,000 people from their homes to make room for sheep. The Sutherland Clearances were the most notorious. The Countess of Sutherland and her factor, Patrick Seller, removed between 6,000 and 15,000 tenants from land their families had worked for generations. Accounts describe houses burned with possessions still inside, crops left unharvested, the elderly carried on backs through the snow, and at least one woman who died during her eviction. Seller was tried for arson and culpable homicide in 1816. He was acquitted. The clearances continued. Displaced families were moved to coastal plots too small to farm productively. When the kelp industry collapsed and the potato blight arrived in the 1840s, there was nothing left. Many emigrated to Canada, America, Australia. Some died on the ships. Some died in the famines that followed. The empty glens tourists find so beautiful today are empty because their inhabitants were driven out at bayonet point. Number 10. The Quinton-Schill Rail Disaster. On May 22, 1915, two trains collided at Quinton-Schill near Gretna Green. A third train then hit the wreckage, and fire consumed it all. A troop train carrying 500 soldiers from the Royal Scots Regiment struck a stationary local passenger train. A minute later, the Glasgow to London Express plowed into the wreckage at 60 miles per hour. The troop train, built largely of wood and lit by gas, ignited. 226 people died. 214 of them were soldiers heading to Gallipoli. Only 52 bodies could be identified. The rest were buried in a mass grave in Edinburgh. 2 signalmen were found responsible. James Tinsley had forgotten about the local train he had arrived on minutes earlier. George Meakin had failed to follow basic safety protocols. Both were convicted of manslaughter. Tinsley served 3 years. Meakin served 18 months. It was the worst rail disaster in British history, and the men responsible walked free within years. Number 11. Smoo Cave and the Murders in the Dark. In the far north of Scotland, where the land ends at the cliffs of Durness, there is a cave large enough to swallow a cathedral. And for centuries, it swallowed people too. Smoo Cave is formed where fresh water meets limestone, creating a cavern system that runs deep into the Scottish coastline. Its enormous entrance, 50 feet high, opens onto a beach. But inside, the cave descends into darkness, with underground waterfalls and passages that have never been fully mapped. Highland legend says a man named Donald McMurdo, the Lord of Rie's troublesome cousin, used Smoo as his base for robbery, piracy, and murder. Travelers who entered never left. McMurdo is said to have killed dozens before his own end came, when he lowered himself into the cave's inner chamber and found the devil waiting. He escaped through a blowhole, leaving only his dog behind. The dog was later found washed up, singed, and dead. Modern archaeology has found human bones in the cave's depths. Whether they are McMurdo's victims or earlier remains is unknown. Number 12. Sawney Bean and the Cannibal Clan Legend. In a coastal cave near Ballantrae, legend says a family of 48 survived for 25 years on human flesh. Alexander Sawney Bean supposedly left his home in East Lothian in the 16th century and took up residence in Benane Cave with his wife. Over decades, they raised children and grandchildren through incest. The family survived by ambushing travelers, robbing them, killing them, and eating their flesh. Pickled body parts hung from the cave walls like cured meat. The story says they killed over 1,000 people before King James VI himself led 400 men and bloodhounds to the cave. The Beans were captured and executed without trial. The men were dismembered. The women were burned alive. Here is the problem. No historical record of the Beans exists. No trial documents. No execution records. No contemporary accounts. The first written version appears in the 1700s, centuries after the supposed events. Benane Cave exists, but it floods at high tide, making long-term habitation impossible. Most historians believe the Bean legend was propaganda, likely invented to portray Scottish Highlanders as barbaric savages. Number 13. The Skye Massacre. In 1577, nearly 400 people hid in a cave on the Isle of Eigg. Every single one of them suffocated to death. The MacLeods of Skye had raided Eigg, and some of their men had assaulted local women. The MacDonalds of Eigg retaliated by binding the offenders' hands and feet and setting them adrift in a boat to die at sea. When the MacLeods learned their men were dead, they sent a war party. The entire population of Eigg, 395 men, women, and children, hid in a cave called Uam Frang, Cathedral Cave. They concealed the entrance and waited for the raiders to leave. But fresh snow fell overnight. The MacLeods found a single footprint, followed it to the cave, and discovered the hidden population. Rather than fight through the narrow entrance, the MacLeods gathered every scrap of burnable material they could find and lit fires at the cave mouth. The smoke filled the cavern. When the MacLeods finally entered, they found nearly 400 corpses. Bones remained in the cave for centuries. Sir Walter Scott visited in 1814 and removed a skull. The Skye Massacre was not the end of clan violence. It was simply the most efficient. Number 14. Lockerbie and the Debris Field. On December 21, 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 exploded over the Scottish town of Lockerbie. 270 people died, and wreckage fell across 850 square miles of countryside. The Boeing 747 was at 31,000 feet when a bomb hidden in a radio cassette player detonated in the forward cargo hold. The nose section separated first, and then the aircraft broke apart entirely. Passengers, some still strapped to their seats, fell for nearly 2 minutes before impact. The wings, full of fuel, struck the town at over 500 miles per hour. A fireball vaporized an entire street. 11 Lockerbie residents died on the ground. The crater where the wings hit measured 155 feet long. Search teams found bodies and wreckage spread across farms, forests, and hillsides. Some debris landed as far as the English border. Presents wrapped for Christmas lay scattered in muddy fields. The investigation traced the bomb to Libyan intelligence officer Abdelbasset al-Megrahi, who was convicted in 2001. Questions about whether he acted alone persist to this day. Number 15. Scotland's secret nuclear bunker. 40 feet beneath a Scottish farmhouse, the government built a bunker designed to survive nuclear war. For 35 years, they pretended it did not exist. Scotland's secret bunker is located near St. Andrews in Fife. It was constructed in the 1950s as a regional seat of government. If nuclear war came, this is where officials would coordinate the response for eastern Scotland. The entrance was disguised as a traditional farmhouse. Guards lived above ground, pretending to be farmers. The bunker could house 300 people for 30 days. It had its own water supply, electricity generators, air filtration systems, and a BBC studio for broadcasting to survivors. Maps on the walls showed expected fallout patterns. Paperwork detailed how to maintain order in a society where most of the population would be dead. The facility remained operational until 1993, staffed by people who could not tell their families where they worked. Today, it is a tourist attraction. Visitors can see the operations room, the dormitories, and the equipment that would have tracked incoming missiles. The cheerful farmhouse entrance is still standing. Number 16. Ben Nevis and the Frozen Dead. Britain's highest mountain kills people every year. Some bodies take decades to find. Ben Nevis rises 1,345 meters above sea level. From Fort William, it looks deceptively accessible. Thousands climb it annually via the tourist path. But the mountain's summit plateau is featureless in cloud, its north face drops in sheer cliffs, and its weather can change from summer sunshine to winter blizzard in minutes. In February 1998, 3 soldiers died in an avalanche on the mountain's north face during a training exercise. In March 2019, a climber's body was found perfectly preserved after lying undiscovered for nearly 30 years. The mountain does not always return what it takes. On average, 3 to 5 people die on Ben Nevis each year. Falls, exposure, avalanche, getting lost. The summit has its own climate, often 10 degrees colder than sea level with visibility near zero. Mountain rescue teams from Lockerbie respond to over 100 callouts annually. Some are rescues, some are recoveries. Number 17. The HMS Hampshire and Kitchener's death. On June 5, 1916, a British warship carrying one of the most important men of the First World War struck a German mine off Orkney and sank in 15 minutes. 737 men died, including War Secretary Lord Kitchener. HMS Hampshire was steaming toward Russia in a force 9 gale when the explosion ripped through her hull. The seas were so violent that lifeboats could not be launched. Men went into the freezing water with nothing but their life jackets. Only 12 survived. Kitchener's body was never recovered. His face had appeared on the famous "Your Country Needs You" recruitment poster. His death shocked Britain and spawned conspiracy theories that persist to this day. Was it really a mine? Was there a German spy aboard? Did someone in British intelligence want Kitchener dead? The truth is probably simpler. Bad weather, bad luck, and a German minefield laid specifically to catch British ships leaving Scapa Flow. The Hampshire's wreck lies in 60 meters of water, officially protected as a war grave. Divers who have visited describe the hull surrounded by unexploded shells, slowly corroding in the cold Orkney Sea. Number 18. The Corryvreckan Whirlpool. Between the islands of Jura and Skara Brae lies the 3rd largest whirlpool in the world. The roar of its waters can be heard 10 miles away. Corryvreckan forms where Atlantic tides are forced through a narrow strait over a submerged pinnacle that rises from the sea floor. At peak flow, currents reach 8.5 knots. Standing waves reach 15 feet. The water does not just spin, it boils. In 1947, author Orwell nearly died here. He was rowing with his nephew and 2 other passengers when their boat lost its motor to the whirlpool. They made it to a tiny island and signaled a passing fishing boat, but Orwell, already weakened by tuberculosis, never fully recovered. He finished 1984 2 years later and died 18 months after that. Local legend says the whirlpool is named after a Viking prince who drowned trying to prove his worth by anchoring in the maelstrom for 3 days. His body washed up in a nearby cave. The Royal Navy classifies Corryvreckan as unnavigable, though experienced sailors attempt it at slack tide. Every few years, someone does not make it. Number 19. The Glenfinnan Viaduct deaths. The iconic railway bridge from the Harry Potter films cost unknown lives to build. No one thought to count the navvies who died. Glenfinnan Viaduct was constructed between 1897 and 1901. It stretches 380 meters across the glen on 21 concrete arches, the tallest reaching 30 meters. At the time, it was the longest concrete bridge in Britain. Building it required an army of navvies, itinerant laborers who followed railway construction across the country. They lived in temporary camps, worked in dangerous conditions, and were paid by the piece. When someone fell from a scaffold or was crushed by falling stone, work continued. There was no health and safety. There was no compensation. There was not even a reliable count. Construction deaths on Victorian railways were so common, they were not news. Estimates suggest the West Highland Line, of which Glenfinnan is a part, killed dozens of workers. Their names are largely forgotten. The bridge remains, carrying tourists who come to photograph the Hogwarts Express crossing above their heads. Number 20. Inchkeith Island, the plague quarantine. In the Firth of Forth, 1.5 miles from Edinburgh, lies an island that served as Scotland's dumping ground for the contagious, the criminal, and the unwanted. Inchkeith has been a leper colony, a plague quarantine, a military fortress, and a prison. In the 15th century, syphilis patients were shipped there and left to recover or die. In the 16th century, King James IV supposedly marooned 2 infants on the island with a mute woman to discover what language humans would speak naturally. The experiment, if it happened, tells us nothing about language and everything about royal cruelty. During plague outbreaks, the infected were transported to Inchkeith and abandoned. Some survived, many did not. The island's isolation made it perfect for containing what Edinburgh did not want to see. Today, Inchkeith is abandoned again. The lighthouse is automated. The military buildings crumble. Seabirds nest in the ruins of quarantine wards. No one lives there. The island remembers. Number 21. The Coastline Ridge and its annual toll. On the Isle of Skye, a mountain range of bare black rock claims lives with mechanical regularity. The Coastline is not Scotland's highest mountain, but it may be its most dangerous. The ridge stretches 8 miles, with 12 peaks over 3,000 feet. The rock is gabbro, rough enough to grip but so hard that it does not weather into obvious paths. Navigation is difficult. Descents are often harder than ascents. And the weather changes faster than anywhere else in Scotland. Every year, mountain rescue teams on Skye respond to dozens of incidents. Falls are common. Getting lost is common. Exposure claims those who underestimate how quickly cold and wet becomes lethal at altitude. Bodies are occasionally found weeks or months after disappearance. The full traverse of the Coastline Ridge is considered one of the hardest mountaineering challenges in Britain. It requires rock climbing, knife-edge ridge walking, and navigation skills that most hikers do not possess. Many who attempt it turn back. Some do not get the chance. Number 22. World War II aircraft crashes in the Highlands. More than 70 aircraft crashed in the Scottish Highlands during World War II. Most crash sites still contain wreckage. Some still contain remains. Training flights, bad weather, navigation errors, and mechanical failures brought bombers, fighters, and transport aircraft down across the remote mountains. In many cases, recovery was impossible. The terrain was too rugged, the weather too severe, and the war too pressing. Crews were listed as missing, and the wreckage was left where it fell. Today, hill walkers occasionally stumble across debris fields, twisted aluminum, rusted engines, and sometimes personal effects that have lain undisturbed for 80 years. Some sites are marked, most are not. In 1945, a B-24 Liberator crashed into Ben More on Mull, killing all 9 crew. The wreckage still lies on the mountainside, and climbers pass it regularly. The site is protected, but pieces have been taken as souvenirs over the decades. The crew members' names are inscribed on memorials. Their bones remained on the mountain until formal recovery operations decades later. Number 23rd, the Glasgow Necropolis murders. Edinburgh had Burke and Hare. Glasgow had its own body-snatching trade, and its most famous cemetery was built partly in response. The Glasgow Necropolis was opened in 1833 on a hill overlooking the cathedral. It was designed to be secure. Watchmen patrolled the grounds. Mort safes, heavy iron cages, protected fresh graves from resurrection men who would dig up corpses to sell to medical schools. But security was not perfect. Records suggest bodies were stolen from Glasgow cemeteries throughout the 1820s and the 1830s. The medical schools paid well and asked few questions. Families sometimes guarded graves for weeks until decay made the body worthless to anatomists. The necropolis itself contains around 50,000 burials in 37 acres. Victorian Glasgow's wealthy elite lie here in elaborate monuments. So do those who could afford more modest plots. And somewhere in the unmarked sections, there may be bodies that were never officially buried at all, people who died in the poorhouses and hospitals, and whose remains were sold before families could claim them. Number 24. The Tay Bridge Disaster. On December 28, 1879, the longest bridge in the world collapsed in a storm, taking a train and 75 passengers into the freezing river below. The Tay Bridge was an engineering triumph, nearly 2 miles of iron girders crossing the Firth of Tay between Dundee and Fife. When it opened in 1878, Queen Victoria herself crossed it. Designer Thomas Bouch was knighted. But Bouch had made mistakes. The cast iron columns were poorly manufactured, with hidden defects. The wind loading calculations were inadequate, and maintenance was neglected. On that December night, a force 10 gale struck the bridge as the evening mail train from Edinburgh crossed the high girders. Witnesses saw sparks, then darkness, then nothing. All 75 people on the train died. Bodies and wreckage were pulled from the river for months afterward. Some were never found. The inquiry placed blame squarely on Bouch, whose design had failed to account for the wind. He died within the year, some said of shame. The replacement bridge, built beside the original stumps, still carries trains today. At low tide, the foundations of Bouch's failed bridge are still visible. Number 25. The Erskine Bridge. Scotland's youngest dark secret is not ancient history. It is happening now. The Erskine Bridge crosses the River Clyde west of Glasgow. Since it opened in 1971, more people have died by suicide from this bridge than from any other structure in Scotland. The exact figures are not publicly released, but estimates suggest more than 300 deaths. Barriers were finally approved in 2021 after decades of campaigning. Installation began in 2023. The barriers are designed to be difficult to climb, reducing impulsive attempts and giving time for intervention. Studies from other bridges show that most people who are stopped from attempting suicide at one location do not go on to die by suicide elsewhere. The Erskine Bridge story is different from the others. It is not about what happened in the past, it is about what is being done now. The barriers are a recognition that some geographical features attract tragedy, and that recognition can save lives. Scotland's landscape tells stories that guidebooks don't print. Islands poisoned by weapons testing, lighthouses where keepers vanished, oil platforms that became furnaces, caves that hold the bones of massacre victims and murder victims alike, railway lines built on foundations of forgotten dead, and those are just the ones we know about. The Highlands are beautiful precisely because they're empty, but emptiness has a history. The people who should be here were cleared, starved, drowned, burned, or driven across oceans to lands they'd never seen. The landscape Scotland sells to tourists is the landscape of loss. Every glen tells a story. Every loch hides something. Every island remembers what happened when no one else was watching. Walk carefully. You're walking on graves.